It is December 2025 as of now. It's closing out a year that has completely redefined the landscape of global ESG standards. Today, we are going to navigate the jurisdictional reach of the CSRD and the ISSB. But more importantly, we need to talk about the massive regulatory shifts that just happened in Europe. Shifts that some are calling a political earthquake. First, let's look at the global baseline. The ISSB standards, IFRS 1 and S2, are now effective for annual reporting periods that began on or after January 1, 2025. The objective here was always to create a single, global baseline for capital markets. And we are seeing over real 37 jurisdictions have already announced steps to incorporate these standards. We're seeing early adopters like the UK, Canada, Brazil, and Nigeria moving forward. Remember, the ISSB is designed for voluntary adoption by jurisdictions, which can then mandate them. It is strictly focused on financial risk and enterprise value. But the biggest news comes from the EU. On November 13, 2025, the European Parliament approved massive changes to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. Here is the headline. The scope has been drastically reduced. Originally, the threshold was 250 employees and €40 million in turnover. That would have affected about 50,000 companies. Here is what Parliament just approved. The employee threshold has jumped to 1,750 employees. The revenue threshold is now €450 million. That is not a typo. This means roughly 80% to 85% of companies originally in scope are now out. Wave 2 and Wave 3, the mid-sized companies and listed SMEs, have been effectively removed. It's not just the scope. The Due Diligence Directive, CSRD, has also been dramatically cut. Parliament decided to retain Phase 1, but Phase 2 has been eliminated entirely. Perhaps most significantly for risk managers, civil liability for victims has been removed, and value chain due diligence is now limited strictly to Tier 1 partners. Regarding the actual content of the reports, climate transition plans, these are now optional. Companies only need to adopt them, not necessarily implement them. It's an obligation of means, not results. Value chain. You can now rely on reasonably available information. Sector standards. The mandatory sector-specific standards have been deleted and replaced with voluntary guidelines. Financial holding companies exempted. ESRS, which is provide the various modules of the metrics, has major revision. If your company has over 1,750 employees and over $450 million in revenue, you are definitely in scope for CSRD prep. If you have 1,000 to 1,750 employees or less than $450 million in revenue, you are likely out of scope, but should pause major compliance investments. Why is this happening? This is a historic shift in EU politics. The center-right EPP abandoned their traditional coalition to ally with far-right parties to pass these reductions. Experts are calling this the model for rewriting all the EU's green regulations moving forward. However, this creates unintended consequences, including a data gap crisis where 35% of SMEs may be unable to report ESG data that investors actually want. Reducing the CSRD scope has unintended consequences, including a potential data gap crisis, legal limitations, competitive distortion for non-compliant firms, and global standards divergence. Now, before you shred your compliance plans, listen closely. This isn't final yet. We are currently in a trilogue, a three-way negotiation between the Parliament and the Council. Parliament wants the 1,750 employee threshold. The Council had agreed to a 1,000 employee threshold. They are negotiating right now, targeting a final agreement by early January 2026. My bet? We will land somewhere in the middle, likely a threshold of 1,250 to 1,500 for Wave 1 companies. Continue reporting and monitor ESRS revisions. For everyone else, do not make major compliance investments yet, but do conduct materiality assessments and monitor the trilogue negotiations closely. So what is your immediate action plan? If you are a Wave 1 company, greater than 500 employees, nothing changes for you yet. Continue reporting and assessing material impacts. For everyone else, the 1,000 to 1,750 employee range, don't make major compliance investments until the trilogue concludes in January. Don't abandon the work entirely. Market pressure from customers and investors remains. Do monitor the trilogue negotiations closely. If you are under 1,000 employees, you are likely completely out of scope legally, but you may still want to consider voluntary reporting for competitive advantage. ESG reporting serves a diverse ecosystem of stakeholders. This includes investors, regulators, customers, employees, and civil society. each needing data for different purposes like valuation, compliance, and accountability. The dual imperative is financial risk for investors, focusing on single materiality through ISSB, and systemic compliance for regulators, focusing on double materiality through CSRD ESRS. The societal demand involves customers seeking ethical practices, employees wanting alignment with values, and civil society holding companies accountable for their impacts on communities and the planet. The standards aim for interoperability, minimizing reporting burden by building on the TCFD framework. Compliance with IFRS 2 on climate largely satisfies the climate requirements of ESRS. Now that we have navigated the timelines and the regulatory landscape, it is time to master the language itself. In the next module, we will start with the core concepts and the terminology in sustainability reporting. I look forward to seeing you there.